guys, so I'm not feeling great. I didn't feel like putting my face on a camera or editing a vlog today, so you're gonna get this Sims Medieval and then a bunch of Sims footage, and I'm gonna talk about my writing process in a little more in depth. So, this is all Sims Medieval footage. It's mostly stupid. For some reason, the video recorder doesn't record audio on this, so I apologize that you can't like hear my Sim laughing while her bird attacks that dude. So yeah, anywho's it. My writing process. So a lot of people have like a lot of steps to their writing process, and that's just like not really how mine works. As basically everybody here probably already knows, I'm a discovery writer, so I kind of sit down and just start writing. But I feel like that's not really a fair description, because like that doesn't tell you anything. So what I usually do is I go through kind of a process of taking in various things that will help set a tone. I may listen to an audiobook or read a book. I may watch a show. I may watch a movie. I may do all of those things. And depending on what is brewing is what my desire to watch will be. Watch, read, whatever. I tend to read horror, but I watch various things. So, for instance, 2 years ago, I wrote Gryffindale, which is my accidental fantasy, which I will start working on eventually. And when I started that, I had just run through Once Upon a Time. And that's all very like fantasy, fairy tale based. So I think that's kind of how it's decided what I am and am not going to write about. So then I wait for some sort of image, thought, line, something. Something to show up in my mind. Usually I get several of them, and then there's one that kind of itches at the back of my thoughts no matter what I'm doing, and that's the one that I pick up on. Sometimes those other images do show up later, and I'm like, oh, well, they were all related, but I don't necessarily know that, and they don't always. So once I have an image I'm fairly comfortable saying will be it, then I sit down and I start working. So this is Sulani in The Sims 4. This is the pack that has mermaids in it. I can't think of the name of it, but right now my Sim is a human, but I do make her into a mermaid later. So I just, the scenery is super pretty, so I tried to include as much of it as I could so you guys could see how pretty it is. And yes, that was first person view there. If you don't know how to use it, it's Shift Tab. Anyway, so then I sit down and this lady's yelling over me, I can already tell. But I sit down and I look at the paper. Well, I look at my word processor. I put my hands on my keys. I either put on some music or a show or something that I've definitely seen before, because I don't want to actually pay any attention to it. I just want it to play a tone. A lot of times at this juncture, when I'm just sitting down to start writing, it's something like Ghost Hunters or Ghost Bros, which I can't call it Ghost Bros anymore. There's an actual Ghost Bros show, and that's really good. But Ghost Adventures, I used to call Ghost Bros because they're like the Chads. So I'm going to call them Ghost Chads. So yeah, I tend to put those things on because they're, you know, like they're a spooky tone and all that, but like, I don't care. It's ridiculous. So that's what I tend to do. And then I sit down and I really just kind of put my hands on the keyboard, close my eyes, and start typing. So this is the premiere night. If you don't see the premiere, you get sad that everybody else saw it and you didn't. So I had to go to a bar because my sim doesn't have a TV. Anyway, so then after I sit down for a while and I do some work, I start to kind of figure out who I'm working with. My characters have started presenting themselves to me by that point. They're giving me thoughts. Some things I'm writing down, some things I'm not. There are things I kind of know about them, things I don't know about them. There are things that I know I want to know about them. And I'm just kind of digging through. I'm following them as they do their thing. It is very different from how I hear people who are outliners, right? The problem for me, as I've mentioned before, but I don't know that I've ever put it in one of these, is that the moment I know for sure what's going to happen next, I don't care to write it. And that is really difficult. So in the event that I figure out what's going on, my story actually dies. And I can try to go back to it. I've done it, I'm almost 40 years old. And I have tried and tried and tried in all of my years. I've been writing since middle school. And I can't. It just, once I know, I'm done. So that's also probably why my stories end the way they do. I have had some people who really enjoy a good, solid ending have been unimpressed with the open-endedness of most of my endings. I do think that's kind of a horror trope, but I'm not one of those people who focuses on tropes specifically, so I always have a hard time figuring out what's a trope and what's not. Anyway, so eventually, yeah, things slow down. You start to get to the point where you don't know where to go next. And that's usually the point when I pull away, I stop looking at it, and I go, let my creativity refill. Usually that involves a day or two of taking in similar content to what got me to where I was. But if I go too far, then I will lose momentum. And if I lose momentum, that is also a really big problem. It might not be as big of a problem as, say, me knowing what's coming next, but it's still a problem. So I don't want to lose momentum. That's definitely a thing. Yeah. So now my sim is at a festival. I don't remember what it was. Oh, it's the flea market, which I actually hate as a sim, but I wanted her to go meet some people. So she's here meeting some people. I hope you're excited. It's super cute, though. I do like the apartment living city area. I'm a fan. Even though I don't have any Sims living there currently. The noisy neighbors thing and the you being a noisy neighbor thing really kind of kills that for me, because sometimes you just need to play violin at 3 o'clock in the morning and nobody understands that. So I'm back at home and I'm building a sandcastle. I think sandcastles are super cute in Sims, so I like to do that. Anyway, after I spend a day or two basically reminding myself that I'm a creative, I go back, I read the last section, chapter, depending on the work and what it takes to get me back into it. But once I've read everything and I can refocus, then I start. And I just kind of do this process over and over and over again. I find that if I keep the tone similar, that I have less instances where I have to fall off and take a day or two off and come back to it. But when that happens, it's not usually as big of a deal. The problem with my drafting style is that, number one, because it's not outlined, sometimes there are plot holes, which I think still happens when you have an outline, but so sometimes there's plot holes and I have to go in with some duct tape and some caulking and fix that shit. And then there's times when I say something over and over again, whether it be a piece of background information that I think is important, but I can't remember if I already put it in there, or somebody does the same motion over and over and over again, you know, like they raise their eyebrow 400 times a day, like they have the butchest eyebrow ever. Their one eyebrow that they can raise happens to be so awesome it looks like they're half Neanderthal. Yeah, so that's probably not how you do things. So that is a thing I have to do in my editing process. And editing tends to be a whole process in and of itself. I know a lot of people have a lot of different ways they do that, and I will explain that. So after I go through that, like as many times as I have to, I put it away. I put it away usually for 30 days at least. But sometimes it's more. Usually it's more. My editing process is really slow. I read really slow. So then after it has sat, I pull it back, and the first thing I do is I do essentially like a book Bible. I do some editing, because there's definitely always things that like I find as I'm going that are like, oh god, no. You should not have been writing at that hour, or you know, whatever, where it just that's not gonna work. I log everything in the story. I use a program called Y-Writer, and with that program I log like character names, descriptions, background information, that kind of thing. And then I also log, they have like items and locations and things, so you can separate it out and keep logs of those things. And the program will itself kind of identify where those things show up based on the text. You can adjust that, so like if you're talking about someone and they're not in a scene, you can pull them out of the scene in your list. So that does work out really well for me. I know that program does not work for everyone, but it is free, so like if you're interested in trying something like that, you know, you can't really lose much. It's also a fairly small program. It does crash occasionally, so making sure to save regularly is important. Usually what I do is I drop section by section the whole story into the layout there, and I actually do my changes in my word processor, and I just copy paste those into the Y-Writer project, because the word processor does a better job of word processing. And so I tend to do that, and then I also regularly export a backup from Y-Writer in rich text format and a Y-Writer backup, so that if something does go awry, if I have to uninstall and reinstall Y-Writer, I still do have my information, even if like for some reason I decide I'm never going to use Y-Writer again. It's all exported in a rich text file, so it doesn't really matter. So I have that backup as well. So after that pass, I tend to let it sit again for at least a little bit. Usually not a full month if I don't have to. Sometimes I just take a break, take a week off, do some video games, and then turn around and pop back into it. Other times it's November, so I take November off and I write a book, and then I come back to it. It just kind of depends on when that lands. But usually it's, you know, at least a week, because at this point, I don't need it to be brand new to me. I've already pulled away from it, and I am trying to improve things, so I don't want to forget as much of it as I did the first run, because, you know, like, it's a different pass. Usually for that pass, I do kind of a deep edit. I change things. I fill in the plot holes that I picked up while I was logging, those kinds of things. So that is usually my most difficult, longest edit. Also, that guy was in that thing while they were banging. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden there was someone in there and they was getting it on. Whoops. Anyway, and I just really think this is pretty, so sorry. So then, after that pass, I typically set it aside for a week or two again, and then when I come back, I try to do a grammar pass, or if there's something I noticed that I missed, like there was a background information on some characters in Boys that I was like, you know, I don't think I got it in all of the places it should have hit, so that you are focused on it. So I went back and that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm basically having it read to me, and then anytime where I'm like, oh, that background information could go in here and that could help reinforce it, I go ahead and pop in and interject a little bit. I've accidentally added a page. I'm a little disappointed in that, but that's okay. So then I kind of do passes as I feel like I need them. I've done, on some stories I've done passes that are just on grammar or just on character stuff. It just really depends on what the story needs. Being that I'm a discovery writer, it kind of comes out different each time, so it's hard to say. It's an interesting process to edit when you didn't know what you were writing in the first place. So yeah, the Sharing is Caring neighborhood action plan got enacted here before I had any points. And that basically means that people can just steal from you. Like that. And then, like, after that group gathering there, I had lost a counter and a sink, my dining room table and chair, and my computer. I almost cried. But it's Sims, and I could just type in some words and get more money. Which I don't do, but I could. And then the dolphin's super cute, so I hope you guys enjoy the dolphin. Anyway. So then, at some point in there, I tend to send it, usually piece by piece, to Travis and CJ to get feedback on. Because at that point, I feel like it's not just, I don't know, the ramblings of an undersleep. I don't know. See, now words aren't working for me. It just doesn't. It's not the same. After I've gone through here, so I feel a little less self-conscious about it, and that's usually when I do that. So, yeah. And then, in theory, I would be publishing then. You know, maybe another beta round. But I don't know. I'm getting hung up on that part. I've had a really hard time getting stories back from betas, like, over the past 4 or 5 years. It has been a thing. And really, like, I get that there's a number of reasons for that. Number one is life may have just come up. There's also a possibility that there's a fundamental problem with my stories. And that's great, but, like, I don't know. So, the feedback that I need, I'm not getting. So, at this point, I'm having a kind of a crisis, because I don't really know what to do with that situation. I've considered, you know, asking for betas, giving everybody 30 days, and then having another 30 days after that before it needs to be published, and then just, I get what I get. But I also, I don't want to have to feel like I have to defend my books, and I think the less thorough you are, the more you get into that situation. So, yeah, that's the thing. So that's my writing process, and my editing process. That was quick. 20 minutes later. Anyway, so this is pretty much the wrap-up of The Sims, and we're going to get into some cat videos. And so I hope you all have a good day. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, Share this video everywhere. Follow me on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Snapchat. All the places. I Snapchat a lot. So, yeah. I'll see you later. Bye. I was just going to let you enjoy the cat videos in peace, but I wanted to let you know that for some reason I forgot that the GoPro needs a lot of light and filmed this with the GoPro instead of my phone, which doesn't, so I had to brighten it so it looks like it was filmed like on a VHS in 1978. It wasn't. This is really like this week, so sorry about that. Have a good one. Bye. So my printer is like clogged, so I'm doing this, but Zugtamoy hears it doing stuff in there, and it is her bestest friend. She wants this paper too. She can have that paper, this is a test paper. This is the existential crisis face. I won't let her fuck with the printer. Oh, Dad moved in the bathroom. Dad moved in the bathroom. The food's in the bathroom. Oh my god, the food's in the bathroom. Somebody needs to let me in that bathroom.